I never thought I'd watch my whole life collapse in front of me, reduced to splinters and dust. With a bulldozer chewing through the walls I built with my own hands, while the so-called president of our HOA stood there in her red blazer and sunglasses, smiling like she'd just won a prize. That was my home, the one place where my family felt safe, and she leveled it in broad daylight, waving forged papers and muttering something about the greater good. And let me tell you, when you take everything from a man, you leave him with nothing but the fight, and that's exactly what she unleashed. When I first bought that little house, it was nothing to brag about, just peeling paint, cracked concrete, a roof sagging like an old man's shoulders. But I saw potential. I saw a place where my kids could chase fireflies and my wife could plant the garden she always dreamed of. I spent every weekend hammering nails, painting walls, fixing broken pipes. My wife thought I was crazy, trying to do it all without contractors. But stubbornness runs deep in me. By the end of that first summer, the place had transformed. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. And that meant more to me than any modern mansion. For a little while, I thought I'd stumbled into suburban peace, neighbors waving from porches, kids riding bikes down the street. Then I met Patricia Whitaker, Patty to her friends, Karen to the rest of us, the self-crowned queen of the HOA, clipboard glued to her hand, patrolling like she was leading a military unit. Too long grass? Expect a letter. A truck in the driveway? Violation. Holiday lights left up one day past New Year's? Another fine. Most of the neighborhood bowed their heads, nodded when she barked orders, treated her like royalty. Me? I was polite, but I didn't bend the knee. And I think that's what rubbed her raw from day one. The first real shot came at a community meeting. Patty strutted in wearing that red blazer, clicked her pen 3 times like a general calling troops to order, and unveiled her legacy project, a giant clubhouse, a pool, tennis courts, and a parking lot big enough for a mall. She called it the future of the neighborhood, something to raise property values by 20%. The crowd clapped nervously, some actually impressed. I sat in the back, arms crossed, waiting for the catch. And then she pulled up a slide, pointed her pen at the map, and jabbed it right into the spot where my house stood. "This," she announced, "is the perfect location for the parking lot." My stomach dropped. I raised my hand, trying to keep calm. "Patty, you do realize you just put a red X over my home? Unless you plan on moving my family into a broom closet. I don't see how this works." The room went silent. She turned that thin smile on me, syrupy sweet. "Mr. Miller, this is just a preliminary idea. No one's being forced out." I shot back. "Then why is my house already marked for demolition on your slides?" A few chuckles from the back, but mostly people sank deeper in their chairs, too scared to pick a side. Patty's grin never wavered. "Change requires vision. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." Those words, the greater good, burned into me like acid. From that day forward, she made me her target. Letters stuffed in my mailbox, violations about grass height, a brand new mailbox I'd installed, even my son's old Toyota pickup parked in the driveway. She sent inspectors around with clipboards, snapping pictures of my gutters, my fence, my trash cans. She slapped an orange sticker on my garage door. "No, compliant structure. Pending review." My neighbors, the same ones who borrowed my tools and drank beers on my porch, suddenly avoided eye contact. I'd catch them whispering, He's the one fighting Patty. And every time I looked up, there she was across the street, arms folded, sipping in my frustration like fine wine. The final straw came late one night when a man in a cheap suit shoved papers into my chest. "You've been served." Patty had filed a motion with the HOA to declare my property a nuisance, legal groundwork to bulldoze my house. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn, papers spread across the wood, coffee gone cold, my wife begging me to let it go. I stared at the words Community Improvement Bylaw and felt like the walls were closing in. For a moment, I really wondered, am I the selfish one here? Am I holding back progress just because I can't let go? That thought scared me more than the bulldozers. I was on the edge of giving up, but grief has a way of sharpening into resolve. A few days later, I drove to the county records office, demanded to see the permits. The clerk frowned, disappeared, came back with a manila folder. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. My name signed neatly on the consent line. Except I had never signed a damn thing. Someone had forged my signature to greenlight the demolition. That was the moment the fog lifted. This wasn't me being stubborn. This was outright fraud. I dug deeper. I found invoices from landscaping companies owned by her cousins, collecting money for work never done. HOA funds funneled into private accounts. Receipts for spa trips and luxury handbags labeled as community enrichment. Contractors promised fast cash if they didn't ask too many questions. The deeper I went, the filthier it got. And when I started quietly asking neighbors, the stories poured in. Fines for shutters painted the wrong shade of blue. Decks torn down over design standards. Foreclosure threats over Christmas lights. Everyone had been squeezed, but nobody had dared to stand up. Until now, I gathered everything, photocopies, testimonies, timelines, but I knew if I just handed it to the HOA board, they'd shred it before the ink dried. Patty had them all in her pocket. I needed muscle, someone who thrived on this kind of fight. That's when I found Collins, a lawyer with a reputation for tearing HOA tyrants apart. When I slid the stack across his desk, he whistled. "Mr. Miller, this isn't just a case. This is a buffet. Fraud, embezzlement, forgery. She's cooked her own goose." He grinned. "Let's eat." The lawsuit hit like a hammer. Fraud, unlawful demolition, emotional distress, damages. My name versus Patty Whitaker and the HOA. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. At the next meeting, I sat in the front with Collins at my side. Patty walked in stiff, red blazer flashing. She started her usual spiel about progress when Collins stood up. "Before you continue, Madam President, my client has a pending lawsuit against you and this board. Anything you say tonight may be entered into discovery." The room went still. Patty's smile twitched. Just for a second. For the first time. The mask cracked. From there, it all unraveled. Subpoenas dragged every dirty secret into the light. Records showed HOA funds paying for her vacations, handbags, even a Caribbean getaway. Contractors admitted they'd been paid for work they never did. Neighbors testified about fines and threats. One old man stood in court, voice shaking with rage. "She fined me $300 for leaving my trash bin out for 10 minutes. The jury leaned in, shaking their heads. Even the judge raised his eyebrows when Collins held up the forged demolition permit. "Mr. Miller, did you sign this?" "No, sir," I said into the mic. Whoever did was lying. Patty tried to hold her ground on the stand. She insisted everything was for the community, that I'd voluntarily surrendered my home. Collins pounced. Voluntarily surrendered? Like a wallet to a bank robber? The jury laughed bitterly. Finally, he held up a contract with her cousin's landscaping company. Sir, how many times did your company service this neighborhood? The cousin shifted. None. We never did the work. Gasps rippled through the room. Patty's lawyer buried his face in his hands. By the time Collins was done, she wasn't the queen anymore. She was a liar caught in her own web. The verdict came fast, guilty of fraud, embezzlement, and unlawful demolition. 5 years in state prison. Restitution ordered for me. When the deputies snapped the cuffs on her wrists, she screamed, I am the HOA! You can't do this to me! Her clipboard hit the floor with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. The neighbors who once cowered now stared at her with open disgust. Not a single person came to her defense. I didn't cheer. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, breathing in the silence, letting the weight lift off my chest. For months, she'd isolated me, humiliated me, crushed the home I built with my own hands. And now, she was the one being marched out. Red blazer wrinkled, eyes wild, her empire collapsing behind her. That night, I drove past the empty lot where my house used to stand. The rubble was gone. Nothing left but bare earth under the fading light. It should have felt like defeat, but it didn't. It felt like possibility. She thought bulldozers could erase me, but all she did was carve out the space for me to rebuild stronger. And if there's one thing I learned through it all, it's this. Bullies thrive in silence, but the moment you stand up and refuse to bow, their power crumbles.